I want to share a story with you guys about my great-grandfather. His name was Samuel. He was a highly skilled carpenter that built a whole lot of furniture, cradles and rocking chairs and couches and that kind of thing, as well as he helped raise a whole bunch of barns, and he actually would help people build their houses. In fact, the house that my great-great-grandfather built is still standing today. It's been expanded many times by my grandfather and my uncles that live in that area. It went from a 2-room, very small cabin to about 15 rooms now. But that particular original structure is still standing, and it's well over 100 years old. So I'm going to share a story with you guys today about what happened when my great-grandfather was faced with a new challenge from somebody else who claimed to be a carpenter. Welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I am a food truck business coach, author of 5 food truck vending books, including Food Truck 101 and Food Truck 201. This podcast is all about helping you start and grow your food truck business. Table Needs invites you to dive into a candid conversation with Christian and Tracy, co-owners of Restless Coffee, about their inaugural year in the food truck industry. Gain valuable insight on menu creation, top-notch customer service, community building, and the dynamics of working with your spouse. Curious about the journey? Click the link in the episode description to watch the video for free. Now, you guys have heard me talk about my life in Kentucky. My family lived in a very small holler. The holler is named Gunstock Hollow, and it got that name because of the land trade that happened. Somebody owned the land, and they traded it to one of our family members for a gunstock. Hence the name Gunstock Hollow. That particular hollow is part of a bigger valley. The valley is part of the left branch of the Beaver Creek. My family primarily lives up and down Gunstock Hollow. There's about a half a dozen or so houses back in that little hollow. And then out on the left branch of the Beaver Creek, more of a valley, many more houses, much bigger community. But it is spread out because it's the country. So my great-grandfather would build a bunch of houses. He would help other people build houses. He would teach them how to build. He worked really, really diligently because he knew the quality of work would allow these folks to live in their home for many, many years. Whenever he built furniture, it lasted for decades, and it was just wooden furniture. In fact, in my great-grandmother's section of the big house that they have now sits her rocking chair that my great-great-grandfather made. It was a wooden rocking chair, and I can still remember Mama Satch. That's what we call my great-grandmother, Mama Satch. I can still remember her sitting in that particular chair, rocking right in front of the fireplace. I can remember her reaching down to her little spittoon because she smoked a pipe and chewed tobacco. Lived to be in her 90s, and she still went out every single day into the garden because that's what she knew. They were subsistence farmers. They grew their own food. They had cows. They did a lot more taking care of themselves than folks do today. One of the skills that my great-grandfather Samuel had was helping people raise a barn. If you've never gone to a barn raising, this happens generally in the late spring, early summer, when someone has finished all the planting, but they're waiting on harvest and they need that particular barn to store the harvest or to protect their animals. So he would help people do a barn raising. Well, there was a gentleman that came into our holler, not a family member, not somebody that was related, but he just moved into that particular holler from a city, and he took up carpentry work. His name was Joseph. He was, according to the family legends, he was not a very well-liked person, but he would build furniture. And he would also help people build their houses and do a barn raising from time to time. Problem was he was unskilled at what he did. Eventually, people figured out he had no skills, but early on, they didn't know that. So they would purchase his furniture or they would trade something to get his furniture. They would invite him over to the barn raisings, and if somebody was doing repair work or building a house, they would invite him as well as my great-grandfather Samuel. Well, there was a barn, a huge barn, one of the families had, and they still have, a whole bunch of acres right along the creek bed where it's nice and flat. And they had a barn where they would store all the tobacco and all the corn and their animals, and it would keep them out of the weather. Well, this barn burnt down, got struck by lightning, and it burnt down. So they had to do a very quick barn raising because they still had animals to take care of. They still had a harvest that had to be gathered, and they had to have somewhere to store it. So they got everybody up and down the left branch of the Beaver Creek, as well as Gunstock Hollow and other hollers up and down the creek. Got all those people together to raise a barn. They were going to do it in one day. So everybody brought something. My great-grandfather brought tin for the roof. My understanding is that Jacob brought a lot of wood, a lot of planks, random size planks, but still, got to get a barn up quickly. So everybody goes to start to work on that particular barn, and their goal is to get it raised in one Saturday afternoon. The story that is passed down through our family is that Jacob and Samuel ended up working on the same wall of this barn, and they ended up having a fist fight over how to do the work on the barn. My great-grandfather, Samuel, stormed off after the fight. He wanted to do it one way that he felt was 100% safe and correct, and Joseph had a different opinion. So he left in the middle of doing the work. So the barn eventually got finished. They started using it, putting their animals in it, getting ready for the harvest. And as misfortune would have it, remember this barn's already burnt down once, real recently, a windstorm came through the holler. And if you've never been in a windstorm in a confined valley, they can get violent very quickly. So this particular windstorm seemed to have made a beeline straight for that brand new barn, and it blew down one of the walls. Now, if you want to venture a guess as to which wall it was, I'm sure you guessed it was the one that my great-grandfather and Joseph worked on. The sad thing was the debris of the wall falling apart and then getting blown around by the windstorm also killed a mule and killed a dairy cow. The mule was extremely important back in those days because they used it to pull the plow. They didn't have a tractor. So as you harvest food, you end up plowing under the stalks and the different bits and pieces of the plants that are left so that they'll actually fertilize your ground for the next year. With no mule, there wouldn't be a way to plow under the gardens. Now, understand that this is very rural Kentucky in the late 1800s, early 1900s. That mule was essentially a shared piece of equipment for people that lived in that area. They would borrow the mule to plow their own little plots of land. So now not only was this family not able to plow under their land, many of the other families that depended on being able to borrow that mule couldn't do it either. A lot of people blamed my grandfather, a lot of people blamed Joseph, but the fact remains that the person with the talent to have kept that barn up left because of an argument over how to do something properly. The consequences were 2 animals were killed and a barn had to be repaired a 3rd time. In our Facebook group, we see people from time to time that will talk about working around the rules. They talk about, how can I start my food truck business and not do it legally? Like, I'll sell food out of my house. There are some states, sadly, that allow that, and I would not eat food out of somebody else's house simply because I can't guarantee that the kids haven't wiped their nose on the counter. I can't guarantee that there's not animals and birds and cats and dogs and everything else that have cat dander and fur floating all through that house. But for some reason, politicians don't really care about food safety. What they care about is getting reelected. As long as nobody gets sick or gets hurt, they don't care. Here, we'll pass a law. So a law gets passed in these states. But there's a whole bunch of states that do not have that law. So you have somebody that's cooking out of their home kitchen. They might be cooking immaculate food. It may look fantastic, but they have no benefit of inspection. They have no insurance. They have no training. They have no food certifications at all. They're just cooking in their home. They go on Facebook. Facebook doesn't care whether you have illegal or legal activities. All they want to do is get the ads paid for. So they say that they're selling food. Someone will come in our group and complain about it. And I'll give them the same piece of advice I'm going to give you. If you run across somebody that you are 100% sure they are not legal, you are obligated to turn them in. You spend a whole bunch of money to learn how to do your business. You spend a whole bunch of money getting your business set up. And if you're not willing to protect the industry that you're in, you're no better than my grandfather when he walked away from that barn because somebody made him mad. Yeah, you get mad because somebody is illegally cooking food and selling it to the public, but if you don't do anything, you are no better. Somebody is going to get hurt at some point. And then you know what ends up happening when someone gets hurt? Some politician is going to jump on that opportunity to make the rules harder for people that are already in the business. They will take the poster child of somebody that's gotten sick or somebody that died, heaven forbid, but it does happen. We must change the rules to keep these mean, evil people from cooking out of their home and killing other people. If you're unwilling to stand up and do what's right, you don't deserve to be in the business at all. The conversation happened in our group about 2 weeks ago. 35 people, 35 members, thought that it was a good idea to let somebody who has no legal training, no permit process, no way to verify that the food that they're cooking is safe and wholesome, they thought it was a good idea just to let them keep on selling. They kept doing the childish things like, don't be a narc, don't be a rat, mind your own business. So I helped them to mind their own business. I kicked them all out of my group. If you're in this business, the hospitality industry, and you don't care enough to protect other people, you don't need to be in the industry. Do something that's not going to hurt anybody. And then you don't have to care about someone doing something illegal. Whether somebody's cooking food illegally or somebody's selling illicit drugs illegally, they're both illegal activity that could end up hurting somebody. Where's your threshold for doing what's right? Where's your threshold for upholding the law? Turning a blind eye is easy. Basically, it's being a coward. Stand up for what's right. Somebody's doing something that's immoral, illegal, or unethical. You have an obligation to say something. Because if you don't say something, you have zero right to complain about it. Thank you so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you're finding all the information helpful to your food truck business, please become a monthly supporter of the podcast. Just hit the support button or follow the link in the description. Every little bit does help keep us going. Join our Facebook group. It's called Food Truck Training. We have a whole bunch of awesome members at all different levels, from brand new beginners to decades-old veterans. They've all got your back when it comes to helping you with your food truck. And again, thank you for listening. Come back tomorrow, because you know I got plenty more to say when it comes to helping you and your food truck business grow.